coming up in all angles, CSEC and CAPE in COVID.
All these exams will be administered in their original format.
CXC's approach, stakeholders' concerns.
Going into exams this year, I still feel unsure, but I'm way more confident than I was last year because last year kind of just felt like a rush.
We have topics that have not yet been covered with examinations in less than a month.
What grade should we give the Caribbean Examinations Council? Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson Miller. That question indeed, what grade should we give the Caribbean Examinations Council? Let's see what we figure out at the end of the program. Now, one area that has been badly affected by the pandemic is that of external examinations. Here in the Caribbean, CAPE and CSEC, in the United Kingdom, O-levels, A-levels, in the United States, SATs, what used to be the exam you had to sit to get into college. Well, no more. Now, there have been different ways of handling them. Last year, there was a lot of angst, lots of anxiety, and also a lot of fuss when results came out and people were not pleased in many cases with the outcome. So, will 2021 be any different? Probably not, based on the concerns we're already hearing. Now, in this program, we're going to be talking to Dr. Kassan Troop from the Ministry of Education. We'll be speaking as well with Dr. Garth Anderson from the Caribbean Union of Teachers, as well as Rihanna Robinson from the National Secondary Students Council. Before we bring them in, though, producer Siobhan Keys spoke to Dr. Nicole Manning, the Director of Operations at the CXC, to try and get an understanding of what it is CXC is doing with these exams.
In 2020, there were changes to how the Caribbean Exam Certificate CSEC and the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Exam CAPE were administered. Students only sat the multiple choice assessment for most subjects, and the final grade was determined by those results and the school-based assessment SBA. For this year's delayed sitting beginning in June, students will be doing all assessments. SBA is the written paper 2 and a multiple choice exam. Director of Operations at the Caribbean Examinations Council CXC, Dr. Nicole Manning, says the council revisited the 2020 approach.
In doing that analysis, we would have looked at a couple key areas. One, ensuring that we continue to deliver quality examinations. Ensure that we maintain and consider the interest of our stakeholders, specifically our students. Thirdly, we want to ensure that we maintain valid and provide valid and comparative results. Now, those are very key tenets for any examination body. And so we had to do that greater engagement, not only with the Ministries of Education, but the student bodies. That's something that we also learned. So we are, and we continue to do direct engagement with the students.
So what kind of engagement?
So we have been meeting with the National Secondary Students Councils across the region. We have had situations where the councils would have written, and we have also formalized our discussions with them in writing. We would have directly provided that information. CXC has also revamped its website, and we would have rolled out a new website, easier to use, to make sure that they have access to the data. We have created what we call the Student Central portal, so candidates have all of their information there. So it's not only that we are sharing the information with our local registrars and the Ministries of Education, but directly we are providing the information to the candidates.
The council's review also led to a change in the consultation approach.
What we did was to embark on another strategy that we thought would have given the students a greater voice. What you would have found the last time is that CXC would have been doing the direct consultations only. This time around, what we would have done is to empower the Ministries of Education to have that consultation. And in empowering, we would have provided the documentation and the presentations, and would have also given them the opportunity to invite us directly to any consultations that they were having on the ground. What CXC did was to put all the options on the table. All the options. So we would have done the analysis and we would have put all the options on the table. So what you would have seen coming out now is the total analysis of what we would have gained from the consultation.
And from the consensus drawn, the Council of Human and Social Development COSOD, comprising the region's education ministers, agreed to administer the full exam.
CXC at the get-go would have made 6 immediate concessions. Yes, we would have delayed the commencement of the exams by 6 weeks for the CSEC, CAPE, CCSLC examinations in collaboration with the territories. We would have broadened the time for CVQs when all activities where CVQ is concerned is done. We would have reduced the assessment requirements for the SBAs, as I mentioned, to as much as 50% in some instances. We would have extended the time for submission of SBAs by as much as 6 weeks, and we are even looking at that again. We would have deferred. We would have given students the opportunity to defer to another sitting. And just to make sure that we are clear, that we have also ensured that we have further treatment of the SBAs. So students can reuse the SBA scores that they would have had from a previous year. They can choose to submit a new SBA, and they can decide that they want to submit their SBAs at another sitting when they are going to defer. And for the very first time, Mr. Keys, CXC will now be accepting SBAs in the January 2022 sitting.
Schools now have up to June 30 to submit SBAs, and according to the CXC Registrar, Dr. Wayne Wesley, that will likely affect the September release of results.
Delaying some of those subjects until the end of the month will have some impact on the processing of those, and it will likely impact what we'll obtain as it relates to the final grades being prepared and released on time.
The council also shared the broad topics for written papers with students on May 7, and the deadline for deferrals was extended to May 14. The CXC says it has to strike a delicate balance between listening to all stakeholders and maintaining the integrity of the exams.
CXC would not want to know that any student is stigmatized because of what would have happened in 2021. The global competitiveness has not been removed.
Javon Keys for All Angles.
All right, so remember our hashtag, it's TVJ All Angles. So let me start with a question that I suspect a lot of people might not want me to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because thank you all so much for joining us, I should say that. In the United Kingdom, as far back as January, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said, we're cancelling O-levels and A-levels, we're not having them. They're going based on teacher assessment, as they had done last year, after a pretty disastrous experiment with an algorithm, which never worked out for marking. So they went teacher assessment, they're going teacher assessment again. In the United States, they have a different system. The external exam for going into college is more the SAT, and tons of colleges have now said, okay, you no longer need SAT to apply, just apply. And all kinds of interesting things have happened. Applications gone way up and so on. Was it never, let me ask you, Dr. Troop first, was it ever at all on the table for discussion, or was it ever in the mix of options that were being discussed that, hey, maybe this just not work out this year, maybe we should just cancel CAPE and CSEC this year and make some arrangement for teacher assessment for grades as we're seeing being done overseas?
Good evening, Dion, and to your listeners. And with respect to your question, it was never something that was on the table with respect to the total cancellation of the examination. CXC, as Nicole just indicated in the recording, did a regional consultation. They went around to the countries and discussed the situation, and ministers of education, permanent secretaries, chief education officers were privy to the consultations, and ideas were proffered at those consultations, and CXC packaged that and then sent it back to each region for further deliberations. When we also went on as a country, Jamaica, with our deliberation, at no point in time, any of our stakeholders recommended a total cancellation of the sitting for the exams.
Okay, well, let me ask about the consultation process. And before I get to Dr. Anderson, Rihanna Robinson of the National Secondary Students Council, we heard Dr. Manning say there from CXC that they were consulting with councils all throughout the region. Does Jamaica Student Council, National Student Council, feel that you were adequately consulted with, that you are really a part of the discussion?
All right, so that's a mixed answer that I'd have to give, yes and no, because when we met with CXC outside of the consultation that would have been held by our ministry, that meeting was not a consultation for this sitting of this year. We met because they did offer us a space, stakeholders group, and they also discussed with us the anomalies that were associated with the previous sitting in 2020, and also asked us our opinions on certain things with regard to the sitting of their exam. So we did ask questions about the sitting of this year, but they said that they did not want to preempt anything. So that meeting that we had with them was no such consultation with regards to this exam that we're sitting this year. And also with regards to the stakeholder meeting that we had with the Ministry of Education, to say that our voices were adequately heard, I may not be able to say directly so, because they did provide us with options, and I couldn't say that what it is that we put forward was really what their final decision did not reflect what we put forward. We were also told that the options that they actually presented to us, so they presented to us 5 options with a feasibility test attached to each option. We were supposed to choose what option was best. But in a town hall meeting a couple weeks ago, Dr. Troop did say that the decision that was taken by the country, which would have been to have comparable questions on the paper 2 exam, which would then reduce the paper by 50%, that did not fit the design. It was said by CXC that it did not fit the design of their exam. But to us, that doesn't sound very clear. We're still left in some deep waters, because we're not clear on how that decision was made, because you presented those options to us. So for you to then turn around and say that you didn't fit the design of your exam, it may appear that the options that you gave.
Okay, you're unfrozen now, Rihanna. You froze for a moment. Okay.
Oh, I froze?
Yeah, it's, Zoom interviews, Zoom all angles, we're used to it, not a problem. But tell me just quickly though, is it that the final decision that was arrived at, the sitting of the full exams, is the student council okay with that?
We're definitely not okay with that, but time is out now. We only have a month left. So we're going to have to find some sort of plan B. And I guess we can discuss that further down. But we're definitely not okay with the decision that was made. And as I mentioned earlier, they gave us options. They presented the options to us, and we chose one of their options. And then they said that it doesn't fit the design of their exam. So we're a bit unclear with regards to that.
All right. And I'm going to come back to you, because I want to know exactly what it is you're unhappy with. But I definitely know that the Caribbean Union of Teachers is not happy. Were you properly consulted with Dr. Anderson? No, you're on mute. You're on mute. Another byproduct of the Zoom, the Zoom era. You're on mute.
Yes.
There you go.
Well, let me put it this way. This year, the consultation went quite differently from last year. And so I participated in the Ministry of Education consultation process. We did not have any direct contact with CXC. We had it last year, not this time around. And like the student said, we have to differentiate between consultation and sensitization. In the meeting I participated in, CXC presented the 5 options, but clearly it was guided democracy. Options 1 to 3, they were kind of saying to us that those can't work. So we were left with options 4 and 5. To the extent I recall, a principal of one of our technical schools asked the question, why is it then you are presenting 5 options and in a very subtle way you are indicating options 1 to 3 can't work? So just tell us that it's 2 options. So what we found, and we are very clear about that in the Caribbean Union of Teachers, CXC are putting options on the table that they think they have the resources and capabilities within their structure to deliver on, not the interests of the students. And unfortunately, they are able to sell that to our ministers of education, who tend, for whatever reason, to listen to them, and in our view, would want to put the weaknesses, the inadequacies within the CXC structure before the needs and interests of the students, which, in our view, the ministers of education have a constitutional duty to look out for the best interest of students.
Okay, hold that thought for me, Dr. Anderson. I have to go to the break. And the Caribbean Union has been very strong in their statements. In fact, they're saying they believe that the ministers of education have abandoned their constitutional responsibilities to the students of the region. So more from Dr. Anderson and our other guests when we come back. Remember, our hashtag is TVJ, all angles will soon come.